Now that you've watched the video talking about the parts of frequency distribution, we're going to use the given data to construct a frequency distribution. Listed below are the scores of 16 students on a math test. Use 4 classes beginning with a lower limit of 60 with a class width of 10. Then find the midpoint and class boundaries. This is similar to what your homework will look like. Sometimes they'll ask for some of these parts, sometimes they'll ask for all of these parts. So we're going to build one and get you used to practicing each part. First of all, they're asking for 4 classes, and so we have 4 blanks here, starting with a lower class limit of 60. Now, what does that 60 represent? Let's go ahead and name our columns. We have a chart here with 4 columns, so the first one is going to be labeled scores from the test. The second column to the right will be our frequencies, what we count. The third one will put the midpoints, and the fourth column over will be the class boundaries. So if we start with a lower class limit of 60, where do we go from there? The class width is 10, and if you'll remember, the width doesn't actually go across, it goes the distance to the next class. So if we're adding 60 plus 10 to get 70, 70 is now the lower limit of the next class down. And if we add 10 again to get 80, that's the lower limit of the third class down. And if we add 10 again, we get 90, and that's the lower limit of the fourth class. It's a little counterintuitive to do all your lower limits first, but that makes it really easy to go back and find the upper limits. 60 to what? 70 to what? 80 to what? 90 to what? And that just takes the common sense of saying, well, if the next class starts at 70, then the first class must end at 69. You don't have to worry about decimals. You're going to stick with the same type of number as your original data. So since our data is whole numbers, all of our scores will be whole numbers. In your homework, if you have something that has a tenths value, then all of your classes will also have tenths. And then you can go back once you have 69 as the upper limit and use that width again. 69 plus 10 is 79, plus 10 is 89, plus 10 is 99, and you can continue to see the patterns. Building these charts is a great way to watch for and make patterns with our data. Remember that frequencies is just another fancy word for counting, so we go back and look at our list of 16 students and we count how many are in the first class between 60 and 69. And if we scan that list, there's only one, the 66. So the frequency is 1. I highly recommend that you underline or circle or cross out those numbers as you're counting them. Even if they're on the homework on the screen, you might go ahead and write them down, cross them out. From 70 to 79, so we're looking for all the data that's in the 70s. And again, if we look at our list, we have a 73, a 72, 2 more 72s, a 73, 72, 73, 72, and 73. And if we go back and count those, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 frequencies, 9 test scores that were in the second class. In the third class, 80 to 89, I'm going to underline these. So we have an 85, an 82, another 82, and another 85. So that gives us 4 frequencies, or the frequency of 4. And then in the 90s, we have a 99, a 99, and that's it. So 2. What I like to do whenever I'm doing these, especially if it were being on a quiz or a test where you don't get a chance to just check your answer, is take the moment and add up those frequencies. 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 4 is 14, plus 2 is 16. Remember that however many pieces of data you started with is the total, and that's going to be important in a frequency chart in a minute. But that also helps me think that I didn't leave anything out. Now, I may have still made 2 mistakes, but right now it's looking good. So that's actually the frequency distribution. But if we add on other pieces like the midpoints and the boundaries, Both of these actually use the same formula. If you remember, it's basically a minimum plus a maximum divided by 2. You're finding something in the middle. Now remember, midpoints are in the middle of the class, and boundaries are between the classes. So as you're following that or using that formula, remember what numbers you're plugging in. So for the midpoint of the first class, you're doing 60 plus 69 divided by 2. And remember, as you put this into your graphing calculator, you either need to use parentheses around the top numbers, 60 plus 69, and then put divided by 2, or put it into 2 steps so that you get 64.5. Now keep in mind, it needs to be in the middle. If you do it accidentally wrong and you get an answer of 73, well, 73 is obviously not in the middle of 60 to 69. So do make sure that your answers make sense. Now, the beauty of the width is that, again, all we have to do is add that 64.5 as the first midpoint plus 10 to give us 74.5, and then plus another 10 to give us 84.5, and plus 10 to give us 94.5. So as you're doing these charts, that pattern, that width, is going to help you fill in your charts. And so right now in our third column of midpoints, we have 64.5, 74.5, 84.5, and 94.5. Now for the boundaries, remember you're looking in between the classes. If you look back at a previous slide, it's almost like the diagonal between the 69 that ends the first class and the 70 that ends the second class. If you were typing that into your calculator, you would do 69 plus 70 divided by 2. Again, use your parentheses on the numerator or turn it into 2 steps. Or we can just use some common sense and eyeball it. Halfway between 69 and 70 is 69.5. And that pattern, again, is going to be used by the width. Now, keep in mind, every class has 2 boundaries. I'm going to erase where I wrote the 69.5 and put it kind of on the line in between the first and the second class. So if we add 10 to get 79.5, that would be between the second and the third class. If we add 10 and get 89.5, that's between the third and the fourth class. But if you look back at the previous slides about boundaries, you also need a boundary above the highest class and below the lowest class. So if you keep adding 10, we get 99.5. Even though that's higher than all the data that we have listed, it still follows the pattern and would be the upper boundary of the fourth class. And then we actually need to go back to the 69.5 at the top and subtract 10 to get 59.5 as the lowest boundary for the first class. So even though there's only 4 classes, we end up with 5 boundary numbers, and each class has 2 boundaries. So the first class, the boundaries are 59.5 and 69.5. Second class would be 69.5 to 79.5. Third class is 79.5 to 89.5. Fourth class is 89.5 to 99.5.